Welcome on in to another edition of Beef Up Front. Big one here on a Giving Tuesday. Sean Brace, Ryan Beef Coyle with you. College football playoff. We finally got the rankings that, quite frankly, are the most important rankings heading into championship week. Of course, we're going to get a lot more information once we wrap everything up on Saturday. We got some games to cover both on Friday and Saturday, but we're going to open up with everything from the college football playoff rankings. Beef, where do we start? Let's pull it up. Let's just jump right in from the beginning here. And I think the hot button items from the start would be Notre Dame jumping, right? Yep. I would say how they had it ranked at the end as far as between South Carolina, Ole Miss, and Alabama. How far Miami dropped. And from the standpoint of, I don't think it was ever a question, Indiana locked in. But other than that, I think at the end of the whole playoff ranking reveal, I think they got it right.
Yeah, you want to pull up the bracket and we can kind of go over that. The main takeaway for me from this all is, and the chairman, I believe Ward Manuel is his name. I think he's the AD at Michigan, but he said basically the teams that aren't playing this week, they can't move. Like other teams can jump them, like Arizona State or just say whatever, or whoever, Iowa State can jump them. But like the final spot is going to come down to who wins that ACC matchup between SMU and Clemson. If SMU wins, they're in the bye. Alabama would be that 11 seed as they are right now. If Clemson wins, then you're down to a 2-horse race between Alabama and SMU. The 9-3 Alabama or the 11-2 SMU is the 11-2 SMU punished for playing in the ACC title game? That's going to be a major topic point, not just for this year, but for going forward in the future. Like, is it fair that SMU, who would be the team as of if the playoff was in right now, they would be in? Is it fair to them that they could potentially be out while Alabama's sitting on the couch watching their game instead of playing in the SEC title game themselves?
Well, how do you feel about that question? Because for me, I think it comes down to this is your playoff game, Holmes. You're SMU, and it look, we're going to learn. Things are going to change year after year. I throw the caveat all the time that things aren't, even across the board. I think there is some unfairness to this. It is what it is. It's what we got. It's a 12-team playoff. I didn't expect everything to run smoothly. I did think that, the big dogs would get in. And if we're really going to be going nuts, again, here we are. I'm not saying we are, but SMU, come on, now I'm giving SMU the credit. But the thing I would say is now more than ever, I think it's important where you are preseason. Yeah. SMU is not ranked. They will be next year, and that's going to be a huge deal. And it's unfortunate, but I think it's just the reality of where we're at. And I don't blame the college football committee. I think they did right across the board. We discussed all day today at length, Alabama, Ole Miss, or South Carolina. And there was a case to be made for South Carolina, in my opinion. Ole Miss, not so much. It's a little unfair, understood. And then Alabama, I thought would get in. I think we all thought would get in. But, look, and it's no surprise because you got the head-to-head matchup there.
Yeah, the head-to-head is really what that comes down to. If you're making an and that's where it gets into the hypothetical. And once again, Alabama won the game on the field against South Carolina. But I think if you were to play that game now with both of these teams at pretty much 100%, you played that at a neutral, Bama's like a 2.5-point favorite. And I think that's a game again, like for sure. I think South Carolina is playing the best football in the country right now. I'll go out on a limb and say that. They've won 6 in a row. 3 of those wins have been over ranked teams. Nobody wants to play that defensive line. Lenora Sellers has been a Heisman-worthy player over these past 6 weeks. Rocket Sanders has been one of the best running backs in the country. They had their chance to beat Alabama on the road at Alabama. They lose by 2 in that game. But Bama doesn't have some flawless resume in their own self. They just lost. They just put up 3 points at Oklahoma last week, who I believe isn't even going to a bowl game. I think they finished with 5 wins, if I'm wrong. And then they lost at Vanderbilt as well. Like, those are 2 really bad losses. So it's not like this is some bulletproof Alabama team, and if they get in, everyone should be afraid of them. Like I would probably take Notre Dame over them in the first round projected matchup as of right now. But that's where it comes back to just the head-to-head situation. And back to your point at the beginning, you think it's a playoff game for SMU. I would agree in that regard. But it is going to be a little bit unconventional and definitely a major talking point and a major debate point if an SMU team with 2 losses gets in or gets left out after playing in the conference championship, losing that second game, and Bama sitting on the couch with 3 losses gets in.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's going to be the major talking point, like of last year with Florida State and Georgia, and who deserved, or Florida State and Bama who deserved to get in.
Yeah. And SMU, what, two wins over top 25 teams, I believe, this season.
The one loss is to BYU, who is a 9-3 team themselves.
Great offense, a lot of fun to watch. But sorry to parrot it again. This is the playoff game. Show us what you got against Clemson. You win, you're in. You handle your business. A lot like Boise State, right? Like Boise State has everything in their hands right here, right now. Beat UNLV in a home game, and you're getting a bye. Lose, and you're not going.
Yep.
Do they get to go? They'll go to a bowl game, right? So what bowl game would Boise State end up in? That's a huge
I'm not sure,
difference, man.
Yeah, I know you won't be seeing Ashton Genty most likely in that bowl game, though.
Hey, look, I think there's something to be said possibly about, we could possibly see a big-time player not want to play in the playoff games. You never know, right? It's a new day and age. Not to say I want to see it, but anyways, all right. So back over to some of the big picture items. Miami, no shock, right? Losers are 2 out of their last 3.
Yep.
Not to say that Syracuse game was a playoff game, because then they would go into the ACC championship game. For me, look, as much as I love Cam Ward, I want to see that offense. That defense was terrible, Beef.
Yeah, I think it was Josh Pate said it was like this was last year's LSU team. LSU was the number 1 scoring offense in the country, but defensively they struggled week in and week out, and that's what kept LSU from reaching heights last year with a historic offense. And last week, Miami went up 21-0. The defense couldn't withstand a 21-point lead in like a win or go home type of game. Miami too played with their food a lot this year. You can argue that they got away with they stole 2 wins in that Cal game and that Virginia Tech game earlier in the season. So their luck kind of ran out, and it's a shame because I think if they did make the playoff, they would have provided for a really fun game. Like imagine if you did get a Tennessee with that high-powered defense against that awesome Miami offense. I think that would have been for a really cool game or something. But yeah, definitely Miami. I don't think deserved that at this rate with who they lost to in Georgia Tech and Syracuse. There's better resumes out there.
All right. Again, Notre Dame, they bump up, which is a good thing in my mind. I thought they deserved it. Penn State 3. What are you looking forward to the most to learning other than the final spot with Alabama and SMU? What has your attention for these upcoming matchups for championship weekend here?
Yeah, so I am intrigued to see, I guess, the situation of if Penn State wins the Big Ten title over Oregon and Georgia wins over Texas, is Penn State your number 1 team in the country going into the playoff? And if that is the case, I think Penn State would rather be the 5 and where they're at now, or even lower, because you look at their matchup now, they would host Arizona State in a December night game in State College, Pennsylvania. You get Arizona State coming up there. And then your next test would be Boise State. I think Penn State would probably be a 10-point favorite, at least in that matchup. So you're looking like a pretty easy walk, I think, into the semifinals there. If you win and you're the potential 1 seed, or even if you're the 2 seed, you're going to have a tougher matchup, I think, than you would in those first 2 games. So that's something I'm watching. And if Texas wins and the championship in the SEC and Oregon loses to Penn State, Texas most likely then the 1 seed probably in that regard. And Texas hasn't looked unbeatable at stretches either. So I think we could get to a situation where like the 1 seed potentially gets upset in this 8-9 game. Like if you're telling me if Texas moved up to that 1 spot and they had to play Ohio State or Tennessee, like you're for sure taking the 1 seed in that game.
It's interesting. And it's definitely something that they're going to have to change moving forward by reseeding, right? Like that can't be it. I think Reese Davis called it out on the broadcast
Yeah.
tonight. Yeah, it was pretty blatant. So I think we all see that. It was something that hit me over the head a couple weeks ago when we were looking at the bracket. Like, wait a minute, that ain't right. But it's the system we have right now. So like that's where I'm getting excited about these potential matchups. Yes, somebody's going to be upset. Fan base is going to be pissed off. Oh well, it's college hoops, college basketball, college football. It's all the same. There's always somebody upset. So we'll see what happens. Hell, even college baseball. I know the teams that make the playoff run, some won't. They'll be upset. So here we are. I'm really excited about these matchups. Now I'm curious. We got Lettuce checking in here. Nick McClay. Why no love for the Cyclones if they win? They got 2 losses.
They'll be in. If they're in the Big 12, they'll be in.
Big 12. So we got them going, and then Kansas State.
Arizona State would fall out.
Arizona State would follow. Gotcha. Okay, there it is. So we do have the Cyclone conversation rolling on here. What is your thought on that game?
The Big 12 title game?
Correct.
I like Arizona State in that one. I'm sorry, Nick, but the Iowa State rush defense is ranked in the 90s. And when you look at Arizona State, they just want to run with Cam Scatterbo. And I really like the under in that game, though. I was looking a little bit into it, that the total's only at 50.5. But when you look at the time of possession for both of these teams, Arizona State ranks 12th in time of possession, Iowa State 10th. So these are two teams that control the ball and want to have 9-10 play drives. And when you look at that, I think that is a great recipe for the under and the way that these two teams play. But I do like Arizona State in that one. The best team in the country this year against the spread as well at 10-2.
Yeah, you had my attention when you talked about Arizona State coming to Penn State, and I'm not going to sit here and make the case that I would back Arizona State, but they seem like that team's been through a lot, man. They got a good head coach. It doesn't seem like he's all mentally there. I love it. So, well, it could be interesting. But again, that is a tough environment to come to, and especially for the first playoff game and Happy Valley, the history of college football. Like, come on, man, that would be insane, that atmosphere. I know my father-in-law was looking at hotels, and I think they were already sold out, believe it or not. This was like 2 weeks ago for that weekend. All right. Anything else from the rankings before we dive into the games? I know we just hit on Iowa State and Arizona State there. I don't all love and respect Lettuce. I don't think we're going to spend too much time on that game anyways. But anything else from the rankings? What has your attention moving forward? All that.
We still just got to kind of see the results from this weekend. I think I said it last week, though. You've looked at, for a majority of the time, Miami was in there, slotted in as the bye team for the ACC. They're not even going to go. Boise State's now been in there, I think, every rankings except 1 or 2 maybe. And if they lose, they're out of the playoff completely. Then you got Oregon. They're a 3.5-point favorite against Penn State. But if they've been the number 1 team in that spot, if they lose, Penn State's in. And then you look at Texas, they could be out as well in Georgia. So the teams that really have been slotted in there for a majority of these rankings, they could all be on the outside and playing in the first round and not getting that bye. I think the most interesting one is Boise State, because if they lose, they're not only not getting the bye, but they're not going to the playoff at all. So their season, we kind of touched on at the beginning, could be completely flipped on its head, and they could be playing in the Tax Slayer Bowl or something like that instead of one of the quarterfinal matchups and a chance to go to the Final Four in the first 12-team playoff bracket.
So we got a big week in front of us, and then we can start locking in some college football playoff numbers. I know that a lot of hypotheticals out there at this point in time, but as you just went through, anything can happen. All we need is just one of those big dogs to lose, and everything is shifting. So I know that there was a big conversation yesterday that I took part of, and my thought was, the fact about Penn State, should they, take a hit because they're playing in this game if they lose. And my thought, Beef, was, look, if you can gain something, then you should be able to lose something too as well. I don't know how you feel about that. Your thoughts, and I'm sure you can apply that to other teams that have a playoff match or are playing in a championship game this weekend as well.
Yeah, I think you look at SMU as a perfect thing there, because if they win, they're in. If they lose, they're probably out. So, like you said, if you're able to gain something, and Penn State at the same time, like if they're going to play Oregon, they have the chance to now go be the number 1 seed. But as we were saying, is that really what you want? And if Penn State loses, they're still obviously going to be in. But if they lose this game, they're probably not the 5 seed, and that path that we labeled out with that as of right now is Arizona State and Boise State, that path probably becomes a lot more difficult. You're probably like the 7 seed, I would say. You're probably still hosting, but maybe you're hosting like Alabama or Indiana or something like that. And then you're probably going to the SEC winner, either Texas or Georgia. So the paths and the lack of or the non-reseeding, I think is definitely going to be the main kind of discussion point going forward. But it's big time games this weekend because of that bye. And do you want the bye or do you want the opportunity to get that first game in, get that game under your belt, and kind of the rest over rust factor? Because if you do have the bye, you're not playing until I believe New Year's Day and New Year's Eve.
Really? Wow, that is a huge amount of time off. Interesting. Which you could pitches, you could spin it as a positive, right? And
A
I'm
lot of
trying
these
to think.
guys at this point of the year, you give them 2-3 weeks to get off. That's as healthy as they'll have been since Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, my question would be is, do you want that? Like, what's the gain from playing in a championship game, right? And I know it's very easy. Like, it's obvious. You can be the overall one. You can win the conference, which is a huge thumbs up, both because of what it does for the playoff, but at the other, that's a goal of yours to start the season. But when it comes to recruiting, that's the bread and butter. That's what it's all about, is getting players. To me, it's all about money now more than ever, but there still is brand awareness, and I think it's a huge deal for you to be in those games when there's nobody else playing. There's only 8 games this weekend, right? Something along those lines. So that's a huge deal. It's a huge plus, and especially if you can come out on top and get a dub there, that's only going to gain more eyeballs from potential recruits out there, and maybe somebody that wants to leave from in the transfer portal too, right? Like, that team just played in the SEC championship game, or a Big Ten championship game. Really looking at Penn State more than anything with this discussion, but
Yeah.
I think it's a huge deal. So you got an opportunity to do something big. It's absolutely a goal to start the season to win the conference, and you're playing in the game. You can't ask for much more than that.
Yeah, you're telling me if you're Penn State and James Franklin, you don't want to win this game against Oregon.
Yeah.
You finally shed the can't win a big game, I think, label off your back. You're a Big Ten champion. You're the top of the conference, where the Big Ten has had an argument this year to be neck and neck there with the SEC. I mean, just look at all the teams that they have going to the playoff. And the 2022 recruiting class of Drew Allers, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, Abdul Carter, all those guys were pretty much brought in and recruited as you guys are the class that's going to get us over the top and win us a Big Ten and send us to the college football playoff for the first time. And they have the chance to kind of fulfill that legacy this weekend. And that's something that they can certainly use going forward. And then, like, you look at Texas, you're telling me their first year in the SEC, they don't want to be called top dogs in that conference after hearing how good and how great Alabama and LSU and Georgia have been. Texas has a chance to go make the statement themselves and kind of anoint themselves as king of the SEC after just 1 year, and then rub it in Oklahoma's face as well, who's not even in contention whatsoever. So I definitely think this weekend still means a lot. We'll see about going forward in terms of if teams are hurt by playing in this game on their resume and whatnot. But I still think winning your conference title means a whole lot.
I agree with that. All right. Great stuff there. And again, I want somebody to ask James Franklin that question. I'm dying for someone to ask him that question. Like, hey, did you think about losing this game potentially because you got to, please, I'm begging whatever media to ask that question. You could probably just run out the side door as soon as you do. But just to hear his answer, because I could imagine the snarkiness. Are you really asking that question? Like, I would love it. But hey, man, there'll be plenty of people thinking along those lines. So we'll see. All right, let's keep it moving here and let's get into this weekend's action. Let's do this. As far as Friday is concerned, the big one is UNLV and Boise State, 4-point spread. Boise at home, 58. I'm surprised this isn't on a neutral field, Beef. What am I missing there? The fact that this is in Boise, man, this is a stacked deck against UNLV, who's been through a hell of a season, a hell of a ride, good football team, good defense, but just asking for a lot for them to go on the road. And again, 4 points, not the biggest number, but I think Boise State's the play here. I'm sure everybody's saying that, though. Your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, what you were saying about this being at Boise, I do find that interesting. It's funny, though, because if it was a neutral, it would probably be at the Raider Stadium where UNLV plays their home game. So maybe that was kind of worked into the contract agreement in the Mountain West so that this game remained neutral. I think if you look at all the G5 games, I believe they are all at neutral sites, and then the Power Four, or excuse me, the G5s are at the home team, and the Power Four are at the neutral site. But Boise State, they won the first matchup when these two played 29-24. And I guess if you want to say they held Ashton Genty down in that one, he only had 128 yards and a touchdown on 33 carries, 3.9 yards per carry. So definitely the best game of the season in terms of a defensive effort against him. And obviously limiting him is the key to the success in this one. And if you want to look at a larger sample size and say maybe that one game was an outlier, UNLV 10th in the country in rushing defense, holding their opponents to only 101.1 yards per game. So they have the recipe for the upset there. But I'm going to go on the side of caution that Ashton Genty is just not going to be denied. You look at the season, almost 2,300 rushing yards, 28 rushing touchdowns, not even going to win the Heisman. He has the chance to maybe even do something better than the Heisman Trophy and take Boise State to the playoff, potentially win a playoff game. I think at the end of the day, that season would probably be more memorable than Travis Hunter and the Heisman. So I'm going to take Boise State to win this one and to cover. But I do like the under in this one. I think UNLV is at least able to kind of keep Genty under wraps, under like 200 yards, and somewhat make this a game.
Boise State only one loss on the season. It came on the road against the overall number 1 team, the Oregon Ducks. Pretty good game, physical game. They hung with Oregon, and Genty was really the star of the show in that one, and for my money. So really big spot for Boise. Of course, the world in the palm of their hands win, and you get yourself a bye, which is just incredible. 6-0 at home, Boise State this season. All right, let's keep it moving and talk about anything for the other two. Tulane and Army, 4.5-point spread. Was 5 earlier. Money coming in there on Army, 45.5 at this point in time. That's at 8 o'clock on Friday.
It scares me a little because yesterday I liked it at 4. I saw it go up to 6 today, so I was like, okay, I'm going to take it now because I thought that was going to continue to go up. But I really do like Tulane in this spot. This might be my favorite play of the conference title weekend. When you look at Tulane's coach, John Summerall, came from Troy, so he's had experience playing some of these teams in the past, these option teams. I saw on Twitter today, he's held 3 option teams, the 2022 Army, 2023 Army, and 2024 Navy, to 9 total points. So he's really good and his teams at defending the option. Tulane just beat Navy a couple weeks ago, 35-0. So he knows how to defend this triple option. I think another smart play in this one would be Army team total under 19.5. The one major thing to look at in this one, this game is at Army. You have a night game in West Point, New York. It's going to be in the 20s or 30s in that one. You got Tulane coming up from the south. So maybe the weather kind of plays a little bit of a factor into this one. But I'm going to go with the track record of Summerall's defenses being able to contain the triple option. So I like Army team total under 19.5 and Tulane -6. I have it, but obviously I would play it at 4.5 as well.
All right. Let's get on over to Saturday. We open up shop. We already hit on the Iowa State-Arizona State game. Anything for you in the MAC title game? Ohio and Miami of Ohio. Miami of Ohio, 2.5-point favorite. That's a noon kick.
I like Miami of Ohio and the under in this one. So I got Miami of Ohio -2.5 and the under 44.5. Red Hawks defense of Miami of Ohio, very strong. They held their opponents to 21 or less in 7 of their 8 MAC games this year and only allowed 15 points per game in MAC play. They held Ohio to 20 points in the regular season matchup. They won that one 30-20. A very experienced Miami of Ohio team. Blaine Gabbert's brother has been the quarterback there for the past 6 years, it feels like. But they won the MAC title last year, and it's a team that played a very tough schedule. Power teams. They played Notre Dame, Cincinnati, Northwestern. So a much tougher schedule. This team has kind of been built up for just MAC play and going on to succeed in these moments. So I like Miami -2.5, and I like the under. I think the defense is the major difference in this one.
Interesting. All right. Let's get on to the SEC championship game taking place in Atlanta. Texas, 2.5-point favorites, 49.5 is our total. First thing you think about when you get these two teams getting back together, what's the first thing that's going through your mind as far as this matchup on Saturday?
The Boathouse and Conshohocken.
Let's go.
but watching that one, that was just Georgia was just running all over the place, and they looked like they were shot out of a cannon on pretty much every play in that one. But the main sticking point in my head was the turnovers in that game. Both Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers in that one didn't play well, and Archie even played a decent amount. But Georgia forced Texas into 4 turnovers. Carson Beck threw 3 interceptions himself. So that was not really a clean game of football, and Georgia still found a way to win 30-15, and that one was on the road. You're going to give me Georgia here at plus 2.5, plus money on the money line. I'm going to take that. I'm not confident in either Ewers or Beck at this stage. I don't think either of them are playing particularly well right now, and Georgia was on the ropes last week against Georgia Tech. But I think the under is definitely worth a look in this game. I think both defenses are pretty strong. When you look at this one, though, I think it could, other than the turnovers, come down to third down. In the first matchup, Texas only was 2 of 15 on third down. Over the course of the season, they're the 28th best third down offense in the country. Georgia, 23rd best third down defense. So good on good there. Can Georgia get off the field and limit Texas drives? I think that's going to be the key thing to watch. But I do like Georgia. I'll take them plus a 2.5, and I'm going to take the under in that one as well.
So as far as devil's advocate here, right? Like Georgia, I know how good Georgia. We all know how good Georgia is. It's Georgia. We don't have to go any further than that. But how many times have we seen Georgia really live up to that billing, right? This year, it was in that game, definitely, right? Like that was definitely one of the games. Essentially, they've played great, like 6 quarters.
Yeah, they're very bad against the spread this year. I want to say they've 2-10 against the spread, 3-9 against the spread.
So should we be looking at this game in a little bit different light, maybe with a skeptical eye here, or is it just too much from the standpoint of went right against Texas and there's not going to be much change in your mind that Texas can do to make this a different result? Or what is it about Texas that isn't giving you any belief as far as their opportunity on Saturday?
I think you look over to the sidelines in that regard. It's a big game, and I'm going to take Kirby Smart over Steve Sarkisian. I'm not a big fan of Sark in big games. He's shown us multiple times in the past, whether it was the NFL or in college. And he's kind of righted that wrong a little bit this year, like last week against Texas A&M. That was never really a game. You look at last year, even when they went to Alabama and won. But the lights are bright in this one, and I think we talked about it too right after that week where he pressed the panic button and he put Arch in and then he put Quinn back in that first matchup. Kirby kind of outcoached him, outsmarted him there. I think this one is a game that could come down to the coaching as well. Georgia, I haven't been a fan of all year. And I know that there's also kind of the cliche of it's hard to beat a team twice. I'd like to see like the actual statistics on that. I bet you it's probably closer to 50-50 in like the past 10 years. But if you're going to play devil's advocate with me in this one, I'd point to the coaching as well. I think that Kirby is a little bit ahead of Sark.
All right, Marshall, Louisiana, anything for you in this one? Right now, DraftKings Sportsbook showing 5.5. Louisiana, 56.5 is your total on that one.
Really like the over in this game of 56.5. 39th highest scoring offense there with Marshall at 31.9 points per game, and Louisiana can put up points themselves, 35.6 points per game. That's 15th in the country. I think this game, one of the funner games of the weekend, actually. I think some of them are lower totals, are going to be defensive games. I think we see a shootout in this one. And Marshall, they were right up there tied with Arizona State against the spread this year at 10-2 with the best record in the country, 6.3 points per game cover margin. And they were also a perfect 4-0 against the spread as an underdog this year. So I like Marshall plus 5.5 in this one and the over. And I think Marshall, we're going to have at least one underdog win outright in this one in this conference championship weekend. I'm going to take Marshall as one of those teams.
Going on the road. Let's see what they got. Big time dub last week against James Madison in double overtime. Marshall has won 6 straight. And as Beef pointed out, pretty good offense there on both of those teams. But on the road in Louisiana, Sun Belt Championship, we'll see. I don't really
doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah, baby. Hey, look, this is all we got right here, right now, baby. So there's 0 complaints coming from me on this one. Marshall, Louisiana will get a screen at 7:30, 8 o'clock. Obviously, Penn State and Oregon's getting a screen. Oregon 3.5-point favorites. Lucas Oil Stadium is where we're heading, 49.5. I've been trying to keep this one simple, and I hate it because it's going back to the way I think about Penn State. When anytime you want to give them that opportunity, give them some credit, they come up small, they come up short. I believe that they can hang with Oregon, but I just think at the end of the game, Oregon's going to score more points. Oregon's going to get to like a 28, 29 mark, somewhere around there. And I don't think Penn State can match them. Your thoughts on this one, though, Beef?
Yeah, I think when you look talent for talent, like when we've looked at the Ohio State Penn State matchup in the past, like you can say Ohio State is just a more talented roster. I don't think really that's the case in this one. I think talent for talent, they're there. Dan Lanning, he hasn't been great in big games himself. You look at both those games against Washington last year, I think DeBoer outcoached him. And I think this year, even against Ohio State, it wasn't a coaching masterclass by him. He had the play that's now kind of outlawed, but it's not like, oh, Oregon dominated that game against Ohio State. So this is a big game for him as well. A young coach. I'm interested to see how he does. But I'm going to go back to the side of you just can't go with James Franklin in a big game here. I'm sure you'll listen to a million other college podcasts this week, and nobody will give you that analysis. But James Franklin, 7-24 straight up when he's an underdog during his time at Penn State. I just think there's too much of a track history here that Penn State, James Franklin, big games just haven't worked out. So I'm going to go Oregon to win this one and to cover. But I think it's going to be a ball game, but a circumstance where Oregon just finds a way to win it late, and it could be another Franklinism at the end there.
Ooh. You think Dylan Gabriel is going to have a day at the office?
So the thing with Dylan Gabriel, he's, I think, benefited more from, like, when you look at Oregon, who they've played, they haven't played the greatest teams outside of Ohio State. This is probably the best defense that I think he's played all year. You can make the argument that Ohio State's better, but Penn State's got probably the best player on the field in this one in Abdul Carter. He could be a game wrecker in this one, and I think if you look at one potential flaw in this Oregon team, it's that offensive line. You remember at the beginning of the year against Idaho and Boise State, those two teams were pushing Oregon around kind of at the line of scrimmage. So if Abdul Carter is able to contain Dylan Gabriel in the pocket, it could be a different story in this one. But I think if we're going to get a Oregon blowout, I think it would probably be more so on Oregon's defense makes a couple plays in this one, more so than Dylan Gabriel has a big day himself.
Home game for, well, excuse me, not home game. That's right. It's Lucas Oil, so middle of the way for both teams traveling. Just trying to look back at the schedule here, checking out Wisconsin. That was their squeaker when they barely got out of there with the victory. That was a hard-fought game. You know, they had their way with Washington. They had their way with Maryland, had their way with Michigan. They've been on a pretty damn good tear since that win over Ohio State. So be curious to get them in a spot where they got to bounce back. And I know they were trailing in that Wisconsin game, so that's probably a good test there. But we'll see. We'll see. I do expect to see points on the board from Oregon. Maybe I'm discounting Penn State's defense a little bit much there, but I still don't have confidence in Penn State's offense matching what Oregon's able to do. We'll see, though. Clemson, SMU, final game on the card here. SMU 2.5-point favorites, 57's our total. 8 p.m. game being played in Charlotte. Beef, which is outdoors, so keep that in mind. As far as this game is concerned, I haven't seen anybody really take Clemson. Are we all in for a bruising on that one? Where do you stand? Because I definitely like SMU in the offense. Haven't been impressed by Clemson all that much. Your big takeaway from that game against South Carolina, they did have a lead in that game, but if you're saying South Carolina is one of the hottest teams, if not the hottest team in college football, that should be an impressive game somewhat in your mind. Where do you stand in this game?
Yeah, I mean, that one, Clemson was at home in that one too, so they had that kind of going for them. I mean, Clemson's not terrible, but I also think Clemson, I'm not going to speak into existence where this team makes it into the playoff because I think they're probably in their first round matchup. They're getting one of those top tier at large teams in that 4-5 game, most likely. Or whoever they would get in that first round, they're probably almost at least a touchdown dog, maybe even double digits in that one. So I don't want to see this Clemson team find their way into the playoffs. So I'm not going to speak that into existence. I'll go SMU minus 2.5. But I do think it's kind of cool that this is the last game. This is pretty much the one that's going to decide really that final spot for sure. Like we talked about already, UNLV could get in over Boise State. Iowa State could get in over Arizona State. But this is for that final potential at-large spot. Is Alabama going to get in? it really determines on this game. So all eyes are going to be on this one, but I am going to take SMU minus 2.5. I just think at the end of the day, they are a better football team. Jennings, since he became the full-time starting quarterback, has really looked sharp, and that team has been playing really well for bulk of the season. So I'm going to go with the Mustangs, another team, first year in a new conference, potentially going to win. You could have SMU, Oregon, Texas, all three major movers in realignment, winning their first year in the conference, and Arizona State as well, going from the Pac-12 to the Big 12. So realignment really taking a toll on its first year.
All right, projected first-round matchups. We'll end on this one, courtesy of Brett McMurphy from the Action Network. Again, these games aren't locked in cement, right? So, like, anything could change. But if these hypothetical matchups did happen, Georgia minus 8.5 against Indiana, Notre Dame 3-point favorites against Alabama, Ohio State 6-point favorites against Tennessee, Penn State 13.5-point favorites against Arizona State.
Yeah, that's what I was expecting probably for Arizona State traveling to Penn State. Not really that surprised by that one. Ohio State, a 6-point favorite against Tennessee. That one is a little shocking considering what we just saw from Ohio State last week against Michigan. Notre Dame -3 against Alabama. I definitely like Notre Dame in that spot. I don't think this is a very good Alabama team, but they do bring a interesting dynamic to the table with Jalen Milroe. Can you defend the quarterback run? And does Alabama just kind of embrace that running game and just try and go with that over the pass? And then Georgia -8.5 against Indiana. I think after watching that Ohio State-Indiana game, I'm pretty sure 90% of the public would most likely be on Georgia in that spot. But that's what I would have to say about those four matchups.
Yeah, as I look at these spreads, I just feel like the sports books are going to clean up. I just have a bad feeling about all these games. Everyone's going to be looking at these games way too easy. But 13.5 is a lot of points to be given. I do agree with you as far as Tennessee. Now that game would be played at Ohio State. Still though,
I'd probably make that more of like 3.5. I'd say.
Notre Dame and Alabama, dude. That's a huge mental hurdle for Notre Dame to get over. Like,
but you look at that one too. You got Alabama going to South Bend. What's that? 15 degrees on a Friday night.
And if they're not invested like they were at Oklahoma, it could get ugly. But you would like to believe that a playoff game, you're going to get the best of Alabama. And then Georgia and Indiana, 8.5-point spread from Georgia. I feel like Indiana would just I don't know. You're asking a lot, though, for them to go down there, to Athens and run with Georgia Bulldogs. If they're playing, yeah, that's a different monster.
But Absolutely. There's one narrative I've been seeing all over Twitter, and Arizona State fits into it as well. It's you want to send these teams from the South up north for a cold game in December that they've never played in. Arizona State, have they ever played in a game below 25 degrees? Alabama, when's the last time they played in a game below 25 degrees? Because you even look, these playoff games, they're either been in domes or they've been in Florida. So these teams haven't really been in these situations. You even look where these schools recruit. They recruit Texas, they recruit California, they recruit Florida. They're not playing in these conditions. So that's something I think we're going to have to certainly take into account as well. And why kind of this seeding really matters. Like why you want to be Tennessee and be the 8 over Ohio State the 9. And now you're not even getting the chance to do that.
All right. Yeah, look, we can get into the projections. We can get into the hypotheticals. But no need when we got action in front of us, all kicking off on Friday and Saturday all day long. It's the last weekend of college football as far as the regular / postseason is concerned. And then we'll get into the bowl season because I know it's the playoffs, but it is still bowl season. So looking forward to the GBC. Dustin Sweetosin from VSiN owning the belt. We'll see if someone could take it from him this year. I think it's year for us. And hopefully we'll have a sponsor for us this year. We've been kicking around a lot of ideas, so we're looking forward to that. That's fast and coming pretty soon here. But bottom line is enjoy the games this weekend, and hopefully we can find some winners. Beef, always a pleasure, sir. Enjoy the games. Good luck on your plays, and we'll do it again next Tuesday, or hell, even Monday probably, or maybe even, Monday. Monday sounds about right. I was going to say Sunday, but no, we ain't doing it Sunday. We'll do it Monday. We'll do it live Monday. All right. As always, if you missed anything, at foxphlgambler.com. Check us out online at foxphlgambler.com.